You're listening to Learning Leader Spotlight, interviews with corporate L&D leaders. On each episode, we sit down with key industry experts to discover more about what's happening in the world of learning and development, from current trends and insights to the most valuable lessons learned along the way. Join us for a fresh perspective on all things training and the best direction forward. Here's your host, Leanne Langford.
Hi, welcome to Learning Leader Spotlight, the podcast where we interview the learning leaders of today to help the learning leaders of tomorrow. I'm Leanne Langford, your host. I'm also the president of Training Pros. Training Pros is an L&D contract staffing company where we put consultants to work with corporations. We like to say, when you have more projects than people, let Training Pros find you the right consultant to start your project with confidence. I am really excited today to have as my guest Stephanie Fritz. She's the Senior Director of Leadership Development at S&P Global. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you, Leanne. Happy to be here.
I'm thrilled. So I've been looking forward to this interview quite a bit. Can we start off just kind of give our audience an overview of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thank you. So as Leanne mentioned, I'm currently the head of leadership development for S&P Global, which is a financial services firm in New York City. I've spent the last 15 years building a career in learning and development in various industries through various different roles. I invested in my own development along my journey, including obtaining various certifications in coaching and various assessments, a master's degree in organizational psychology, and most recently, last year, I graduated with a doctorate in adult learning and leadership from Columbia University, and I live in Brooklyn, New York.
So we're going to amend her name is Dr. Stephanie Fritz. If I ever got my PhD, I would want my kids to call me doctor. So,
The only person I may call me doctor is my younger brother.
There, that makes sense. Wonderful. So what initially attracted you to this field?
Yeah, so I'm an elementary school teacher by training. It's actually the only thing that I ever wanted to do. And throughout high school and college, I spent all of this energy and effort preparing myself to be a teacher. And then in the last semester of my senior year of college, I did my student teaching experience, and I realized that this is actually not the right path for me. And I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do next. So after graduating, I worked in several different entry-level office jobs, learning about different careers in different industries. And a friend of mine saw a job at a biotech company that was a learning and development coordinator, and she thought I would really like working at a specific company. And then when I looked at the job description, it was an interesting mix of skills from my teacher training, as well as some of the administrative skills that I had gotten from these other entry-level jobs. And when I interviewed at that particular company, there was something really special about the culture and the people who worked there. The job was really administrative in nature, but we were a 2-person learning and development team. So there were a lot of opportunities to build skills and get involved in higher level projects. Very quickly, I realized how much I loved being in front of the room as the facilitator and seeing the impact of what I was teaching on the learners. It really harkened back to my days as an elementary school teacher. It was everything I loved about being a teacher, but in a context that was much more intriguing to me than being in a school system. So I could see that what I was doing was help people grow and shift behaviors. I also learned that I really loved designing learning experiences, and I was able to do a lot of that in this particular role. Over the years, I've held many different types of learning roles, from traditional training and onboarding to talent management, to now what I'm doing, which is more designing leadership programs for high impact leaders, all levels of our company.
That is a wonderful story. I can't tell you how many people we meet on a weekly basis that are school teachers wanting to move either into being a facilitator or being an instructional designer. And I loved your story because you didn't jump from being a teacher to being a learning leader. You had to go through the progression just like the rest of us do.
Yeah, I had a lot of failed experiences along the way too, in terms of oh, not this isn't the right thing. But so yeah, it really, being able to have that freedom very early in my career helped me frame what it was that I was actually looking.
So I absolutely love that story. Um, so you've been in L&D for a while. Can you give us your insights into the biggest changes in the last few years in L&D?
Yeah. So I think the most recent one, and the pandemic, of course, played into this. It's really the switch to virtual delivery. There is this kind of push pull right now of virtual versus in person learning because now there's return to office. But you are seeing that not every team is in the office at the same time. So in person isn't as impactful as it once was. There are, of course, moments where it really does matter. But what I learned during the pandemic is that virtual delivery gives you more global impact. So S&P is a global company. And so we were in 35 different countries all over the world. We're 37,000 people spread out across the globe. And so when we do virtual delivery, we get a lot more perspectives from our global participants. And so what it does is it really allows for a lot more rich and robust discussion within the learning experiences. There's trade-offs to both approach, and it definitely should be weighed based on whatever the objective of the learning actually is. But it's really nice to know that we have this viable option. I think virtual deliveries come a long way, both in terms of our ability to do it and do it well, and also the technology. I've also noticed a focus on wellness and mental health in a lot more, especially like manager and leader development trainings. The expectations of managers these days is extraordinary, and the organizations are really built to support those managers as well as the needs of their employees. So I see a lot more of this need for more balance and flexibility with managers and with employees within organizations. And then the last one, I would say, wouldn't be in the last couple of years, maybe in the last 10 years. I've seen more robust degree programs that give foundational skills in this space. So a lot of us do fall into learning and development. Many of us that, in the last 20 years that grew our careers in this space, I know a ton of people who come from various backgrounds, whether it's psychology, teaching, could even be sales. People fall into these L&D roles, but you don't have to do that anymore. There's actually a lot of ways to learn this work, including experience if someone's willing to take a chance on you. And the skills that you might bring that aren't domain expertise. Maybe you're a really great problem solver. Maybe you're really great with technology. All of those things are really important. And then you can build domain expertise with things like certificate programs, various certifications and coaching and assessments, and then degree programs. And it really is starting to legitimize the field and have a robust career path for people. So many of us, myself included, who fall into this work can feel imposter syndrome. So having programs that enhance your credibility can really be a good remedy.
Those are some really interesting and great insights along the certification track. I remember one of the first certifications was it's now called CPTD. It used to be CPLP through ATD. That came around. I was in the original group 19 years ago when they didn't have study materials or anything. And we got a list of topics to study, and we got together once a week in person and helped each other study for it. It was very interesting, and it's come such a long way now.
Yeah, there's so many different certificate programs and different degree programs that are focused on the L&D space. So there's a lot of different ways to learn this work. So even if I got my master's degree in organizational psychology when I was 37, and then I graduated with my doctorate when I was 42. So you can absolutely go back to school and legitimize yourself and get to where you need to be. If you're feeling like I was at the time, where it's like, all I am is an elementary school teacher, and I've been very fortunate in this work to get certified in a variety of different things. But I still felt like there was something that I wanted for myself to really legitimize my own career path and be able to give me far more options in the future.
So I think that those are some great observations. I really like it. Um, where do you think we're going in the next 5 to 10 years in L&D?
So this is probably more of a wish list item than what I expect to see. But we still don't have the right measurement of learning and learning transfer. and the impact on behavior. We don't have it quite right. There's ways to look at, how many people are attending, what are they learning, but how does it really show up in an organization? And that work takes more deep study. It takes more time. It takes a lot more resources to be able to really go in an organization and measure that type of impact. And so it's something that, because behavior change does take time, you're not going to see an immediate return on investment if you're trying to change behavior. Skill development is a little bit different because with practice, you can usually see it. But if you're talking about true behavior change or mindset shift, all of those things take a bit more time. And so if you just go to a week-long program, it's not going to be a solid measure of the actual impact. That week-long program has to kind of marinate and sit with a person for a number of months. They try different pieces. Maybe they make some mistakes. They're overcorrecting certain things. And, giving space to allow that person to really figure out like what skills they can take away, what behaviors they can take away. I would really love for a very robust, maybe tech savvy type of way to measure learning value and impact to an organization.
Yeah, it sounds like a wish list for sure, but I do hope that's where we're going. I've seen us come so far with regard to measurements. Um, so I'm a bit older than you. So when I started in the early 90s, we were pretty much just measuring um, reaction and knowledge transfer and what I call bottoms in seats.
Mhm. We
How many people
we have
went
that metric also.
how many people we put through. And then when I started studying it, then I started learning about, there's this whole impact. So I started reading up, Kirkpatrick and Phillips and all. And so it's really come a long way now. There's whole institutes and whole degrees and whole certifications you can get in measurement. And I just think it's going to continue. I also think that the AI may help us gather better data to do those measurements.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that this AI kind of influx either helps us find more time to be able to get those impacts and study that research, or study that the impact to the organization, or AI is able to figure out how to measure it, right? Because if AI can take away some of the administrative work of the learning programs, that's great. That gives us more space and time, and then, or maybe it's a way to solve.
Let's shift gears a little bit. What are one or two skills that you look for when you're hiring that are a little bit harder to uncover?
So I have a really solid team, and actually none of them have domain expertise in the work, which is really interesting. But they bring an amazing skill set in other ways. They're very good problem solvers. Some of them are just like extremely organized and understand how to do program management, project management, and they have so much passion for the work and they care so much about the participants. So in terms of when I was hiring this team, I did decide that domain expertise was less important than what they were bringing, because there are, as I mentioned earlier, various ways to learn the domain expertise, and all of them are taking advantage of different modalities in doing that between work experience and getting different certifications, trying out different programs. But when I think about our program partners, so some of the vendors that we work with, um, the expertise in virtual facilitation across different platforms. So we have some vendors that are really comfortable with Teams. We have some vendors that are really comfortable with Zoom. We have very few people that we work with that are good at both. So because our team, we're curious, we're learners, we're all self-taught into how do you facilitate in Zoom, how do you facilitate in Teams. So we train each other. We made a ton of mistakes that we that we learned from. But I just don't see our vendors and program partners being particularly agile and adept at facilitating across certain platforms. There's like a comfort level and it has to be on the platform. The reason that this is an issue for us is because we, in the past, have had some certain limitations with Zoom. So our company had turned off the chat feature for quite some time. And so if you're facilitating a virtual program and you don't have access to the chat and there's 30 to 50 people in the room, that can be a little problematic. People are not able to really contribute in the way they want to. You're in a condensed time frame, usually if you're doing virtual. We have since lifted that, so it's a little bit easier, but it's still, just something to keep in mind in terms of virtual facilitation that different companies, some places are a Zoom shop, some places are a team shop. And so how do we expand expertise across all the different forms?
So that's very interesting. I've not run across too much of that. As you know, we have the virtual facilitators, but we also, one of the things we have is the virtual classroom producers. And those people they work in every tool. That's one of the things that they have to do so that way they can help the facilitator with the tool versus the facilitator having to know the tool.
Yeah, that feels like the right approach, is making sure that your producers are adept in all the different tools.
Yes. I mean, and that's what they do. So, um, where do you get your industry news and information?
So my favorite resource for industry news is actually not a learning magazine. But with my background in organizational psychology, I'm interested in learning about what's happening in the external environment that might impact a shift in leadership skills, right? So AI is the big one right now. And the big kind of philosophy right now is that AI isn't going to replace leaders. Leaders who know AI are going to replace leaders. And so how do I, as head of leadership development, help our leaders upskill and really be prepared for AI? So that's one of the challenges that I think about. And so we live in this very dynamic environment, and it impacts how we work and what's required of us in the workforce, and how do we really stay ahead of that curve. And I find Harvard Business Review to be very useful in that space. Not everything is applicable to learning, but just understanding from a business perspective what's going on allows me to kind of put myself in the shoes of the leaders that I work with.
I think that's an excellent recommendation. Actually, when I was in my graduate program, that's what the professors told us to read was Harvard Business Review. They gave us some other things too, but that was one of, they said, this will give you a better insight into what's happening that will affect your role.
Yeah, because training is the way that we build knowledge within the organization. And what you're building knowledge on is usually to upskill your organization on whatever is happening externally so that you can compete in the marketplace.
Yes, I love that. So what is one book you'd recommend for someone wanting to move into your role?
Yeah, so this goes along the lines again of the organizational psychology realm, but it's a book called Organization. Oh, you can't see it. I'm blurred out. It's called Organization Development, A Process of Learning and Changing. And it's by Warner Burke and Deborah Newman.
And what's great about that book? What am I going to learn?
So what's great about this book is so Harvard Business Review will give you kind of what's happening now. What this book gives you are frameworks to take in that information. And then thinking about where in the organization is the change really going to be impacting? Is it the top line leaders of your organization? Is it your middle managers? Is it your individual contributors? And what are all the upstream and downstream levers that you can pull to enact change? And training is one of those mechanisms. And then from that training, how does it impact, how managers behave, how individual contributors show up and become more motivated? What are the systems and processes that we need to think about for this? And so what this organization development book does is it really gives you like the overall framing for how to take in that information and some suggestions of what you might do to develop your organization.
It sounds interesting. I love books that give you, of the larger framework and then go into the parts and pieces. If they just go straight into the parts and pieces, I'm always trying to figure out the framework. So that one sounds interesting.
Yeah, it's more of a textbook than like a beach read, like page turner, but I've read it multiple times. It was part of the curriculum in my graduate program. And you can't see it because my screen's blurred out, but I have little Post-its all over this book of notes of things that of flags that I want to make within the book to remind myself where to find certain pieces. So it has become really my guidebook. I've recommended it to a few people in my organization. One of them also refers to it as her guidebook as well. So we've made a bit of an impact at S&P with this book.
I love to see a well-loved book like that with my fiance. It drives him crazy that I have little Post-it notes and I have highlights and I have folded down pages and all that. He goes, "That's terrible. You're destroying the book." I said, "No, I'm loving the book."
Yeah, I've been called a book murderer, and I feel the same way. I think you just got to reframe it. I love this book so much.
Exactly. Yes. Gosh, this has been really good information. I've enjoyed the conversation so much, Stephanie, or Dr. Stephanie. I want to thank you for coming on our podcast. And the best way I can think to do that is to plant 5 trees in your name with our reforestation partner. That's our charity here. We're going to plant 5 trees on the Monarch Restoration Project so that we're planting trees right now to help reforest the path that monarchs take and help increase the population, monarch butterflies.
I love that. That's so beautiful. Thank you.
You're so welcome. I'll send you a certificate after the show. And again, thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you for sharing with our audience. And that's it for this week's episode of Learning Leaders Spotlight. I hope we get to hope you come back for next week's episode. Thanks so much.
Thanks for joining us for the latest episode of Learning Leaders Spotlight, interviews with corporate L&D leaders. You'll find links in the show notes to any resources mentioned on today's show. If you're enjoying our podcast, please subscribe so you never miss an episode and leave us a 5-star review. This episode is brought to you by Training Pros, the award-winning contract staffing agency that works exclusively with learning and development professionals to match the right consultants to client projects. If you're in corporate L&D and have more projects than people, let the industry practitioners at Training Pros provide you with the right L&D consultant to start your project with confidence. Find out how we make finding quality consultants easy by scheduling a consultation at www.trainingpros.com.